The origins of the technology we will discuss lie in a forgotten epoch, the Dark Age of technology. It was a time of boundless scientific ambitions and a complete lack of moral barriers. If remnants of control still remained on Terra, then on the outskirts of the galaxy, humanity was left to itself. Scientists of colonial worlds, free from supervision, did monstrous things, which ultimately led to the catastrophe known as the Machine Rebellion. However, on the planet Nuceria, technological progress took a different, even more sinister path. This world, having preserved a high level of development after the long night, represented a strange paradox. Advanced technologies here coexisted with archaic cruelty. Nuceria was ruled by a caste of aristocrats known as the High Riders, and the foundation of their society was ruthless slavery. The social structure of Nuceria resembled a grotesque parody of ancient Rome. Despite the external gloss and technological development, the ruling elite of the city of Deshea reveled in bloody spectacles. To make gladiatorial fights in the arenas as cruel as possible, and to eliminate any chance of mercy or refusal to kill a brother in arms, the slaves were implanted with rare and forbidden archaeotech from the Dark Age, the butcher's nails. This technology, originally developed on Terra, was deemed too inhumane even by the standards of those cruel times and did not go into mass production. However, on isolated Nuceria, the STC blueprints were preserved. It was here that the capsule with Primarch Angron landed. He did not become the ruler of this world. He became its victim. Angron, like other gladiators, had these barbaric devices hammered into his skull, although calling them implants is technically incorrect. Implants are designed to improve the carrier, to give him new capabilities. The nails gave nothing. They only took away, stole personality, and inflicted endless torment. Later, when the Emperor forcefully took Angron from Nuceria, depriving him of the opportunity to die in battle alongside his slave brothers, this became the point of no return. This salvation only spawned eternal hatred for his father in the Primarch's heart. Subsequently, Angron's condition became the subject of close study. Archmagos Velcaradar, attached to the World Eater's fleet, conducted a deep analysis of the device's impact on the demigod's neurophysiology. His report, sent personally to the Emperor, contained a grim verdict. The nails parasitize the brain, and their influence is irreversible. They were slowly but surely killing the Primarch. Soon, the Archmagos received an encrypted message bearing the personal seal of Malcador the Sigilate. The order from the Regent of Terra was categorical: keep the information in the strictest secrecy. The 12th Legion was already known for its instability and lack of discipline, and news of the inevitable and imminent death of their genetic father could lead to the complete collapse of the World Eaters. Nevertheless, the Master of Mankind did not abandon attempts to save his son. He ordered Angron to be brought to Terra, to his personal laboratories beneath the Imperial Palace, so that he could study the nature of the parasitic device himself. Of course, the Primarch would never have voluntarily agreed to such an examination, so his transport was carried out while he was in a state of deep-induced coma. The legendary Arkan Land, a techno-archaeologist of Mars, famous for his expeditions into the forbidden vaults of the Dark Age and the discovery of many lost STCs, became a witness to this unique operation. Land was one of the few who theoretically understood the operating principle of this technology. In the closed archives of the Adeptus Mechanicus, such neuroimplants were classified under the codename Cruciamen. However, after a brief examination of the patient, the techno-archaeologist was forced to admit what the Nucerian butchers had implanted into the demigod's head was a much more ancient, complex, and cruel version than any known specimens. On that day, Arkan Land was granted the highest honor. He was admitted into the Holy of Holies, the secret laboratories of the Imperium, where he found the Emperor himself leaning over the open skull of the unconscious Primarch. As Arkan Land himself later wrote in his chronicles,
On the central slab of the operating room rested something resembling the corpse of a giant. It was a creature with hypertrophied musculature and bulging veins, a being that had strayed as far as possible from the human template, yet still retained a genetic link to its progenitor. In the eyes of the techno-archaeologist, Angron appeared as a living myth. He resembled the ice giants of Nordic sagas or the genetically engineered ogres of the Dark Age. Everything human in him was twisted to grotesque martial proportions. Even in an unconscious state bordering on death, his coarse face was twisted in a grimace, testifying that this warrior had known nothing in life but pain. Land could not tear his gaze away from the grisly, crude cybernetics implanted in the demigod's skull. The Emperor, meanwhile, dispassionately studied the readings on the diagnostic screens. The hololithic projection of Angron's skull, brain, and spine revealed a terrible picture. The entire image was riddled with dozens of thin black tendrils. These were foreign bodies, parasitic synthetics that had taken deep root in living flesh.
For Arkan Land, what he saw was not just a deformity, but technological sacrilege. Ancient, forbidden heresy embodied in metal. The silence of the laboratory was broken by the calm voice of the master of mankind. I suppose you have already encountered such devices. Yes, Divine One, answered the techno-archaeologist. During the expedition to the vaults of the Hexarcheon, the very archives that were sealed by your personal decree and ratified by Fabricator General Kelbor Hall, everything found within was declared unknown. The knowledge hidden there posed a moral threat and a risk of cognitive distortion. The Emperor's fingers touched the temple of his unconscious son, reading the structure of the metal. But you recognized the technology. In the Apocrypha found in those crypts, it was called Cruciamen. Land nodded. The Emperor did not comment on the term, continuing the tactile scanning. I have never seen an active specimen, Land admitted, and never a model of such power, neither in stasis fields nor in blueprints. The devices in the closed dungeons were primitive crafts compared to this construction. I expected something different. Why, in your infinite wisdom, did you implant this device into the Primarch? I did not do this, Arkan. Land bowed his head. Then, to my great shame, I admit that I do not understand what I am looking at, Divine One. The 12th Legion calls this the Butcher's Nails, answered the Emperor.
The Emperor continued to study the data streams. You see the defilement of my template, he pronounced. The work of a primitive but cruel genius. My initial hypothesis was incorrect. I believed that these devices artificially stimulate rage, but the truth turned out to be much more terrible. The surgeons of Nuceria did not simply add aggression. They reshaped the limbic system and the insular lobe of the brain, completely destroying the mechanisms of emotional regulation. They rewired the neural circuits so that the brain of the 12th lost the ability to receive pleasure from anything other than violence. Only impulses of anger pass along the nerve pathways freely. Any other signals are distorted and turn into agony. His own emotions cause him pain. Land was horrified. No, Arkan, he is in pain from everything. Thinking, feeling, even simple breathing. All this brings suffering. The only respite available to him is the neurochemical reward for aggression. Anger is the only moment when he is not in pain. How vile, whispered the techno-archaeologist.
This is a perversion of the very concept of cognition, whispered the techno-archaeologist. The Emperor remained absolutely impassive, examining the schematics. This rewiring blocks higher cognitive functions, quite ingenious for such primitive technology. Can you extract them? Of course. Then why haven't you done so? Instead of an answer, the Emperor placed his hands on his son's head. The image on the screens changed, demonstrating frightening detail. Arkan saw how the black tendrils of the parasite had grown through the entire nervous system, descending along the spinal column. Every movement of the body caused the Primarch pain, converted by the implant into rage. But the truth turned out to be even more terrible. The limbic lobe and the insular region of the brain were not simply damaged by the insertion, they were surgically cut out even before implantation. The butcher's nails did not disrupt the function of these areas, they replaced them. In place of living tissue pulsed ugly black cybernetics. They are the only thing keeping him alive, Land realized with horror.
Thus, the butcher's nails are the pinnacle of the twisted bioengineering of the Dark Age. It is not just a stimulant, but a parasitic system that completely intercepts control of the host's endocrine and nervous activity. The mechanism of their operation is monstrously effective. The implant forces the production of colossal doses of noradrenaline, driving the organism into a state of permanent aggression, and simultaneously completely blocks serotonin receptors. The host is physically incapable of experiencing peace or joy. The only key opening the floodgates for pleasure hormones is killing. In passive mode, the nails generate phantom pains of such intensity that they are capable of driving one insane. Relief from the torment is possible only through violence. In battle, the device heats up, literally cauterizing the cerebral cortex. In the Chronicles of the 12th Legion, there are grim testimonies of how warriors smelled the specific chemical scent of a hormonal cascade, mixed with the aroma of burnt brain matter, bursting from the grills of the helmets of fighting brothers. This was a cruel joke of the Nucerian aristocrats. They created the ideal slave, who receives a reward only for his cruelty. For Angron, this became a sentence. His brain was not simply damaged, it was destroyed and replaced by a machine demanding blood.
The tragedy lay in the incompatibility of technologies. The butcher's nails were designed for the human brain, not for the highly complex cognitive architecture of a Primarch. Angron's brain, possessing incredible regeneration, constantly tried to heal the damage, but the implants dug in only deeper. It was an endless war inside his own skull. The nails deprived him of sleep, the only time when consciousness can process experience and recover. They erased his personality, leaving only primitive instincts: find the enemy, kill, repeat. His brother, Lorgar Aurelian, was the first to realize that Angron was dying. He saw that the device had already destroyed the barriers between sections of the brain, and the end was inevitable. The World Eater faced a choice: oblivion in death or eternal torment in immortality. Lorgar chose the latter, initiating the ritual of ascension during the Shadow Crusade. But the Blood God possesses a cruel sense of humor. Even having become a Daemon Prince, a being of pure warp energy, Angron did not escape the torment. The butcher's nails ascended with him, becoming part of his demonic essence. Now it is not metal, but a metaphysical wound on his soul. The only way to briefly drown out this eternal pain is to die, but Khorne does not let go of his favorite toys. Every 8 weeks, 8 days, and 8 hours, Angron returns from oblivion to experience his endless nightmare of rage again and again. The fateful moment determining the destiny of the World Eaters arrived during the cleansing of the Gina system. It was there that Angron made a decision that forever changed the gene pool of his sons. The Primarch despised his legion. In his eyes, the genetically perfect Astartes were inferior to his fallen gladiator brothers from Nuceria. The main complaint was slowness. Angron demanded that worlds be brought to compliance in no more than 31 Terran hours, the length of 1 day on his home planet. To fix his sons, he gave the order to conduct mass implantation of the butcher's nails into the entire personnel. Apothecary Galan Serlac was appointed responsible for this nightmarish project. However, the task proved to be practically impossible. The nails in the Primarch's head were unique archaeotech, and attempts to create replicas of them led to catastrophe. The first batches of implants were crude counterfeits, and the mortality rate during operations was 100%.
Legionaries died on the operating tables, but this did not concern Angron. He demanded results at any cost. A rebellion was brewing within the Legion. Many officers who retained their sanity were categorically opposed to turning elite warriors into mindless berserkers. But the proponents of ascension won. Realizing that his own knowledge was insufficient, Galan Surlak resorted to a trick. He turned to Archmagos Vel Caradar, playing on the main weakness of any tech priest, the thirst for knowledge. Surlak understood no Martian could resist the opportunity to study a forbidden tech artifact of the Dark Age. The complex architecture of the aggression stimulators mesmerized Caradar. With every failed attempt, with every open skull, his obsession only grew. The tandem of the mad apothecary and the fanatical Magos stopped at nothing until the secret of the nails was unraveled.
The first joint experiments of Surlak and Vel Caradar were monstrous. In the chronicle describing the rise of Angron, detailed accounts of the implantation procedure performed on a librarian named Akar have been preserved. Galan Surlak, having made the replication of the nails his life's goal, did not dirty his hands with blood personally. He watched the process through the optical sensors of surgical servitors, conducting the nightmare from a distance. The psyker's head was shaved and rigidly fixed in a cranial clamp, steel staples dug into the temples and under the jaw, completely immobilizing the skull. "We begin. Mark the time." A cold order rang out, and the silence of the apothecarian was torn apart by the screech of the surgical saw's activation. Ikar's ears were blocked by the piercing sound, but a second later the tone changed. When the rotating edge touched flesh, the screech became dull and wet. The psyker's face was sprayed with a fine scarlet mist, and the air instantly filled with the thick, metallic scent of post-human blood. The sharp pain of the incision was replaced by a teeth-shattering vibration. The monomolecular blade sliced through genetically enhanced muscles and bit into the ultra-durable bone of the Astartes skull. The librarian's entire skeleton shuddered while the instrument opened his cranium. The technological process had changed by this moment. If the installation of early, unsuccessful prototypes required drilling a complex network of pinpoint holes, turning the patient's head into a sieve, now the method had become more radical and brutal.
The path to replicating the technology was paved with corpses. The design of the nails continuously mutated in attempts to find a stable configuration. While early prototypes required turning the carrier's skull into a sieve by drilling a complex network of holes, later modifications were attached differently. However, the result remained unchanged. The fleet's crematoria worked without interruption, disposing of fresh batches of legionaries who died on the table or instantly fell into irreversible madness. The final model that went into mass production was based on a fundamentally new architecture. It was a teardrop-shaped module made of dark matte metal from which extended a bundle of cables for subcutaneous connection. The structure was fastened above the brow ridges, resembling a sinister steel crown. The implantation procedure turned into a bloody ritual. Under the impassive supervision of servitors and techno-adepts, the warriors' heads were fixed in steel vices. The screech of surgical saws biting into the ultra-durable Astartes bone gave way to a squelching sound when the monomolecular blades reached the soft tissues. The air in the apothecarians was heavy with the thick metallic scent of post-human blood.
The next stage was the mechanical opening. Apothecaries inserted steel retractors into the incision. To the grinding sound of bone plates being spread apart, unnatural for a living creature, the surgical wound widened until the wet, pulsating gray matter of the brain was revealed in its depths. At this moment, the pain became blinding. It rolled in waves, radiating from the opened skull throughout the entire nervous system. The unique physiology of the Astartes would have allowed them to easily suppress this torment. Their bodies are capable of instantly releasing combat stimulants and natural neuroblockers into the blood, preventing pain shock. But the World Eaters consciously rejected this gift. Through an effort of will, born of superhuman control, the warriors suppressed their body's defensive reactions. They did not simply endure. They threw their senses open to the agony. For them, this operation was not a medical procedure, but a ritual of rebirth. They accepted this torture as purification, as the necessary price for transitioning to a new, more brutal level of existence.
The finale of the operation resembled the activation of a bomb. Mechanodendrites closed the contacts with a dry click, and the implant seemed to gain a malevolent will of its own. Sensors flared, and bundles of cables, obeying a programmed command, plunged deep into the gray matter, pulling the main module along with them. With a wet crunch, the device sank into the incision, becoming part of the skull. But as soon as the surgeons began stitching, the unforeseen happened. The fusion of primitive technology stimulating rage with a brain tuned to the energies of the warp caused a catastrophic resonance. The psyker's body instantly became superheated. Losing control, he expelled a stream of pure psychic power. The scream of pain turned into the roar of flame. Waves of ectoplasmic fire burst outward, incinerating equipment and personnel, until the host himself burned to ash in a flash of uncontrolled energy. This became a cruel lesson. The butcher's nails and the psychic gift are incompatible. The first alarming signs appeared even at rest. Brothers standing near the implanted librarians began to suffer from migraines and spontaneous bleeding. But in real combat, the situation turned into hell. Under the influence of the nails, psykers lost control over their powers. Their mental barriers crumbled, turning them into living bombs. They incinerated enemies and allies indiscriminately, broadcasting waves of pure hatred that caused cerebrovascular blockages and strokes in those around them. In the end, most of the Legion's librarians either died from overload or were destroyed by their own brothers as a threat. Those who survived became outcasts, doomed to madness.
For the Legion's librarians, the outcome was foregone. The butcher's nails and the warp were incompatible. Whole squads died in agony from mass cerebral hemorrhages and apoplectic strokes, taking those around them down with them in a vortex of uncontrolled psionics. Angron issued them an ultimatum, either extraction of the implants or death. But it was a choice with no option. To extract the nails without killing the host was impossible. The psykers, loyal to their father to the end, made this sacrifice and died, every single one. This was not just death, but an agonizing fading of the mind. The real technological breakthrough happened only after the bloody campaign on the planet Genna. Having studied the trophy technologies of the local genesmiths, the apothecarian was finally able to stabilize the design. The new mass-produced prototype consisted of a bundle of thin silvery cables and neuroleads pulsing in a weak energy field. Unlike the crude, thick dreadlocks of Angron, this version looked more elegant, but the essence remained the same. When the question arose about the first volunteer for the final test, Captain Khorne stepped forward. The implantation procedure of the final version was barbarically simple. The main part of the device consisted of two ribbed metal rods a little shorter than a palm. From their open ends hung bundles of microwires, no thicker than a human hair. If one did not look at these wires, the name nails ceased to be a metaphor. They really were nails, and they were driven into the skull with force worthy of a hammer. Now the warrior's nape was crowned by a mane of metal braids falling onto the shoulders, a grim likeness of their genetic father's hairstyle. When Khorne woke up, he did not immediately realize the change. First came a strange, unfamiliar sensation in the back of the head, like an itch, and then the nails bit for the first time. The world was painted in crimson tones, and the calm, rational warrior disappeared. Only bloodlust remained. On that day, no one survived in the operating room. Khorne, driven by new artificial rage, tore apart everyone who was in the room, thereby marking the birth of the new World Eaters.
From this moment, the Legion entered an era of endless blood. The World Eaters began to suffer colossal losses, not only in battles with enemies, but also in internecine skirmishes, often killing each other in fits of blind rage. And it seems this suited them perfectly.
When Khorne, standing amidst the slaughter he had caused single-handedly, first realized the true nature of the nails, Angron entered the room. The Primarch was smiling, a rare, grim sight. He asked only one thing: "Do you understand now?" And Khorne understood. He had become the perfect weapon. To enhance the effect of the implants, Angron ordered increased dosages of combat psychochemistry, turning warriors into mad berserkers. This path of self-destruction could not go unnoticed. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, arrived with a punitive mission. In history, this event went down as the Night of the Wolf. Russ demanded the barbaric implantation be stopped and a return to Terra so the Emperor's surgeons could extract this abomination from the legionaries' heads.
Negotiations quickly escalated into a massacre. Many wolves and eaters died, but the lesson was not learned. Angron rejected help, continuing to drive the nails into every recruit. Since then, the Butcher's Nails have become both the curse and the only joy of the 12th Legion. Sometimes this technology is adopted by berserkers of other warbands, for example the Black Legion, but the original is always more terrifying than the copy. There are myths that the most strong-willed carriers are capable of suppressing the nails and retaining clarity of mind, but reality is much more prosaic. No World Eater with Cruciamen in his head is capable of creation or complex intellectual activity anymore. It is a one-way street. This is a failed, prolonged experiment of the dark age of technology from which there is no exit. And the scariest thing is, they like it. If you ask if the World Eaters have a strategy or logistics, the answer will be no. The Legion, as a unified military machine, ceased to exist. Now these are scattered bands of madmen traveling on rusty, dilapidated ships whose holds are packed with slaves and gladiatorial pits. At any convenient opportunity, they kill each other for the favor of Khorne. Even on board the Conqueror, Angron's legendary flagship, chaos reigns. If any planning happens, it is only in rare minutes of calm when the nails stop biting the brain. But these minutes become shorter and shorter.